I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about what to do next after you have read the book, It Starts with the Egg. Most people that come to see me, they have read this book. They have made the supplement recommendations. They've changed the diet. They've made the lifestyle recommendations, but it still hasn't worked. So I wanted to take a functional spin on this book, really how we would look at some of the recommendations a little bit differently, where we would dig in a little further, what we see is regularly missed. So I'm excited for you to listen to this episode, and thanks a lot for being here. I know most of us that have the low AMH marker, it can really kind of embed into our subconscious and we get stuck on that marker. We forget to look at the other biomarkers in the body and really what's been missed. And there's a study here that talks about the effects of vitamin D supplementation on ovarian reserve markers in infertile women with diminished ovarian reserve. It's published in the National Library of Medicine. And it delves into the intricate relationship between vitamin D and fertility and reveals that vitamin D deficiency may be linked to decreased ovarian reserve, as indicated by higher serum FSH, low AMH, and low antral follicle count. In simpler terms, ensuring adequate vitamin D levels could potentially boost your fertility odds. And we see low vitamin D levels all the time with our clients. So definitely check out our Fab Vitamin D3 K2 supplement. You can go to fflnaturals.com. That's fflnaturals.com. Use the code GPN15 at checkout to receive a 15% discount. That's GPM15 at checkout to receive a 15% discount. Pop quiz. What exactly makes a great diet to optimize fertility? Is it keto? Is it carnivore? Is it paleo? Is it AIP? Truth is, it's none of the above. The most important factor is consuming the diet that is right for you, because those diets may have worked for someone else, but we're all different, and that diet may not be right for you. That's why it's so important to figure out right now how food impacts health and ultimately your reproductive health, which foods you need to avoid so that you can reduce inflammation, and which foods you need to add so that you can prepare for pregnancy success. Because remember, if your body is under attack, even by a seemingly healthy food, it wants to survive, not procreate. So once you've figured out the foods that are right for your body, you can personalize your diet so that you can improve your fertility. And one of my favorite ways of doing this is starting the elimination diet. And I am excited to announce that our spring fertility recipe guide is now ready. This includes a 5-day meal plan, grocery shopping list, all free from the top allergens. All you need to do is go to Fertility Diet Freebie. That's Fertility Diet Freebie to get your free fertility recipe guide, all including spring recipes. That's fertilitydietfreebie.com, fertilitydieetfreebie.com, fertilitydietfreebie.com. I didn't need to go to donor eggs. Obviously, I don't regret it. I have beautiful children. I could have done things differently. I was still cycling back in my 20s. I could have looked at my health, the environmental toxins, the stress I was under.
Many women are being told their eggs are too old. That's an assumption. You can't test egg quality.
Many times it's the man. It's the man who's got a food sensitivity or the zinc deficiency.
There can be a root cause to these quote unquote period problems. The doctor will pass you a pill without any question of why.
Why is IVF the first step? Because we believe it should be the last step. Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Welcome back. I'm Sarah Clark, founder of Fab Fertile and your host. I believe the functional approach is the first step for anyone on the fertility journey, and my aim is to help you get pregnant naturally. Today, I'm welcoming Brandy Busco back to the podcast, and we're digging into what to do after you've read the book, It Starts with the Egg by Rebecca Fett. So this episode is for you if you've implemented the suggestions in the book, but it still hasn't worked. If you were so overwhelmed by the book, you didn't know where to start, that your partner isn't making any of the suggested changes, it's just you. And we're going to be digging into the details. So if you're really confused of what to do next, we're going to be talking about what to do if your TSH is normal. So if your thyroid is normal and what we see that's being missed. What does low vitamin D actually mean? And what to do about if you are supplementing, what could be missed? We're talking about diet. So we're digging into food sensitivities and what we see that is regularly missed, what to do if you're supplementing with melatonin, and what we see on testing that could be an indicator of something else is going on. So supplementing with melatonin, what's being missed there, what we see with DHEA, that is typically something we see people are supplementing with. What is, again, missed there? What to do if you've tossed out all the toxic products, you're eating organic, and you feel like IVF is your obvious next step. What we see from a functional standpoint that can be missed. Definitely check out episode 6 for a functional medicine 101 talk, plus a look at some of the tools we use to help couples conceive. And Brandy's part of my team here at Fab Fertile, and she's an integral part of our couples coaching program, which uses functional lab testing, diet and lifestyle changes to dramatically improve conception. So if you are struggling with infertility, your body is desperately trying to tell you something, and focusing on your health will either help you get pregnant naturally, or if you do need to go to the fertility clinic, it'll improve your chances of success. So she's a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, certified transformational health coach, an emotional freedom technique practitioner, and she loves supporting women so they can learn how functional medicine addresses the underlying cause of disease or illness. Thanks so much for listening. I'm really grateful that you are here. Make sure you hit subscribe. And if you know someone else who's on the fertility journey, please share this podcast with them. Okay, so before we jump into this, I wanted to refer you to the disclaimer at the end of the podcast. I'm just going to talk about it now too. We are not doctors, so be sure to consult your physician before making any of these changes. Our goal is always to educate you so you can be empowered to know that there's many changes that you can make right now that'll help you get pregnant naturally or improve your chances with IVF. So as we were talking about today, we're going to be digging into the book, It Starts with the Egg by Rebecca Fett. And so the first one was published in 2014, the same year that my book, Fabulously Fertile, was published. And the second edition came out in 2019. So this book, a high percentage of the people I regularly speak with and that we work with, they have read It Starts with the Egg. And it's really become the Bible of the fertility community. There's a lot of really great research in there, studies, actionable steps. Now, the thing is, why we wanted to do this podcast and talk about it is that some of those recommendations can be generalized. Obviously, she's pulling it from studies. And so we here with the functional approach take a very personalized, customized, targeted approach that's right for you. And a lot of the recommendations in there potentially could be overwhelming. Many people I speak to have done a lot of the changes. Other people read the book and are like, I don't even know where to start. So we, as we said before, we focus on the whole body. We don't focus on symptoms. And our goal is to reduce the stressors on the body. So with that, I wanted to give some tips to help you of what to do next after reading It Starts with the Egg. And just before we get into that, so it takes 90 days for the egg to renew itself, and the life cycle of the sperm is 70 to 80 days. So in that really short period of time, you can make major changes to your fertility for both male and female fertility. We're going to be talking about supplements a little bit later, but first one is vitamin D. This is something that we see quite regularly, with vitamin D being quite low in the single digits or teens. So let's talk about that one, Brandy, vitamin D.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if you live in a warm climate like California or Florida, we still see people with low vitamin D levels. The important thing to understand about vitamin D is that it is actually considered a pro-hormone. So you do need to be really careful about monitoring and supplementation. So if you're supplementing with large amounts, you need to be monitoring what's happening with your blood levels. The other thing that's important to know with regards to any vitamin or mineral is that they work synergistically with other vitamins and minerals in the body. So when you find vitamin D in nature, it's not by itself, it's always coupled with other vitamins and nutrients. So if you're just supplementing with vitamin D, but your calcium levels are off or your vitamin K2 levels are off, then you're not going to be able to utilize that vitamin D properly. And so this is why we talk about this whole person approach, and not just focusing on the supplement itself, but trying as much as possible to get it in the most natural form through whole foods, nutrient-dense foods. But we do find that there are many people that do need to supplement because their levels are low. Functionally, like a functional range can range anywhere ideally from 60 to 80 is what we ideally would like to see it. Many times we do see people come to us and their vitamin D levels are in the 30s. So that definitely does have an impact on fertility. It also has an impact on your immune system. You may have been hearing more and more about vitamin D lately because of viruses that are going around and how it benefits the immune system. But it's also really important not to take vitamin D in isolation. So we always recommend taking a vitamin D3 supplement with K2 so that it has its cofactors with it so that your body can actually utilize it and absorb it correctly.
Yeah, this is something that we see if there's autoimmunity. So definitely looking at there's correlation with autoimmune, with low vitamin D. And we're also seeing it with low levels of vitamin D can be linked with either SIBO or parasites, Giardia, Candida, worms, and also getting back to that autoimmune. So over 50 million Americans have an autoimmune disease and many are not diagnosed. We regularly will see a lot of it is more potentially celiac or Hashimoto's that's undiagnosed. And we're looking at a blood chemistry review, doing a full review using functional levels. So it's for healthy people, whereas for the conventional side of things, it's for people with disease. So it just flags it earlier. Again, it's not to diagnose, it's to educate. And then whatever findings, whatever's flagged, then you would take that to your physician. To me, and like Brandy was saying, it's not just looking at the vitamin D and yes, you can supplement. Well, the functional approach is, well, why is it low to begin with?
Just because you have low vitamin D doesn't mean that you have some autoimmune disease. So I want to make that clear. It's actually very common. We've had people who've come to us who are taking 10,000 IUs a couple times a week, and they've been taking it for a couple months and their levels still haven't shifted, and they ask why. Well, like Sarah alluded to, there's a few reasons. It could be that it's missing the cofactors, so your body can't use them. There is problems with too much vitamin D. So if you're taking too much, it can actually cause issues if you're taking too much and not absorbing it. But then the question is, why aren't you absorbing it? Are you taking a pill form and it has to be absorbed in the gut, and there's some issues with the gut like leaky gut or food sensitivities that are causing issues with the gut and you're not able to absorb your nutrients correctly? Is there some toxins in the gut? Is there some pathogens in the gut? So that's why you always have to ask the question, if something is low and you know you're supplementing but the levels are still not changing, why is that? Is it an absorption issue? Is it a cofactor issue? There's a lot of things to really look at and think about. Just adding in the supplement isn't a surefire way to bring your numbers back to normal.
And a good episode to check out is what vitamin D levels mean for fertility. We go into uber detail about vitamin D and fertility. So that would be a good one to check out on the podcast. So vitamin D levels, lower ones can be prevalent in miscarriage and then also a lower incidence of natural killer cells. So looking at vitamin D and figuring out why is, as in it starts with the egg, is a good place to start. And also when you are supplementing, making sure that you're getting your levels tested regularly with a physician. So the next one we have is hypothyroidism. So we see this very rarely, and this is something that I have. Yeah, we see with a lot of people when we do people get focused on the TSH and being told it's normal. When we dig into the full panel, we find that there's definitely healing opportunities in there. So thyroid problems are actually common with POF, so premature ovarian failure, premature ovarian insufficiency, unexplained infertility, ovulatory disorders, and also there's a link with miscarriage. With antibodies, miscarriage rates are actually doubled. Some of those studies are mentioned in It Starts with the Egg. So really the thyroid piece is key to look into. And then also recent studies, so 4% of healthy women are found to have subclinical hypothyroidism. The rate increased to 15% with ovulatory infertility and 40% with women with POF. And we regularly see thyroid dysfunction. So let's talk about the thyroid a little bit, Brandy. It's a huge topic.
Most of the time, the thyroid isn't the problem. So there's issues with the thyroid, but what's important to understand is that the thyroid is part of a system of endocrine glands, and they all communicate together. And so if there is a problem or a weak link in one of those glands, the communication system between the glands becomes broken, and they get mixed signals and miscommunication. For example, the thyroid is very highly tied to the adrenal glands. And so if the adrenal glands are having issues because you're under an extreme amount of stress, you're pumping out a ton of cortisol, and your adrenal glands are signaling to the rest of the body, we're under attack, I'm pumping out all this cortisol, you need to slow down production of the thyroid. and slow down production of hormones, then they're going to get mixed signals, and you'll start to have thyroid symptoms, thinking that it's your thyroid that's the problem, when in reality, the problem is the stress, not necessarily the thyroid. The thyroid is just responding to the messages that it's getting. So that's an important thing to know. And so you mentioned subclinical hypothyroidism. That's where people have thyroid symptoms, but it's not actually the thyroid that's the problem. It's the other things that are going on that are sending signals to the thyroid to slow down production, slow down conversion, and then you start to get thyroid symptoms. And so it is important for your thyroid to be imbalanced and working optimally, because it is one of the master regulators. It regulates metabolism, it regulates temperature. So these things are really important, but your thyroid is not going to function properly if you're under a lot of stress. Stress encompasses a lot of things: food sensitivities, blood sugar issues, you're not sleeping, you could have gut infections, maybe you had a car accident and you've been injured and you have an injury that's just been nagging you for months. That's a stress. If there's work issues, like you hate your job and getting up to go to work every day is you dread it, that's a stress. And so it's really important to understand that when you're looking at the thyroid or anything at the body, we always have to ask the question, what else is going on? And so we do have a lot of women who come to us who are on thyroid medication, but they still don't feel well. Well, because the medication was a Band-Aid, it didn't fix the original problem. And a lot of times it's also important to understand that in order to see what's going on with your thyroid, you need a full picture. So as Sarah mentioned, you can't just go with a TSH, and if your TSH looks normal, you're going to feel 100%, because most of the time, women do not. Their TSH looks fine, but they don't feel well. They still have those symptoms. And so by doing a full thyroid panel, we can actually see, is your body converting inactive thyroid hormone to active thyroid hormone? So a lot of things like Synthroid or levothyroxine is T4 only. Well, T4 is inactive thyroid. It needs to be converted to T3 to be used by the cells. And some of that conversion can happen in the liver and it can happen in the gut. And if there's any dysfunction there, that conversion is not going to happen properly. So again, we need to always take a step back and think, why is there an issue with my thyroid? Why am I having these symptoms? And start to address those rather than just relying on the number on the paper and a medication to try to fix it.
Yeah, which is that Band-Aid approach and that myopic focusing on instead of looking at the whole body. This is an issue with a lot of people that we work with. I've got a lot of episodes on this. So there's the link between thyroid dysfunction and fertility, the AIP diet, so the autoimmune protocol diet, and Hashimoto's, and why this matters if you're TTC, you're trying to conceive. There's a study in the Journal of American Medicine talking about the efficacy of the AIP diet and how it helped reduce many factors for improved lifestyle factors for people with Hashimoto's. Lots to help there. So that would be the thyroid. The next one we have is celiac. So there's a study, and they talked about in the book, and it starts with the eggs. 1,000 women undergoing IVF, less than 2% had celiac antibodies, same as the general population. What we typically see is that there is people that either have undiagnosed celiac disease or they have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Just going to back this up a little bit. So you can start a gluten-free diet, which helps the process of rebalancing folate and homocysteine levels, but then nutrient deficiencies can still be prevalent. And that's why we do a hair tissue mineral analysis test to really dig into, well, why are your mineral balances? They could be low or imbalanced. So we see that a lot. But with a non-celiac gluten sensitivity, this is something that I have myself. And I say a high percentage of people that we work with, they have a sensitivity to gluten. So in the book, they are recommending, obviously, to see if you have celiac, but with a celiac test, there's a lot of false negatives.
This is something that's really, really common. I would say that there's a very small percentage of the population that actually has celiac disease, because that is the autoimmune version where when you eat gluten or wheat, your immune system attacks your gut and attacks your body. So there is a very small percentage of people that have celiac disease. What's more prevalent is non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So you don't actually have the autoimmunity, but whenever you do eat gluten or wheat, your body is creating antibodies to it and it's not able to digest it correctly, and it's wreaking havoc on the gut, which then also wreaks havoc on absorption of nutrients. And we know that you do need certain nutrients for optimal fertility. One example of that is cholesterol and fats. Those are the most important components for manufacturing hormones. And so if you aren't absorbing those nutrients, you could be eating the best diet in the world, but you're also eating gluten, you may not be absorbing those amazing fats and in turn are not able to produce hormones because you don't have the building blocks. The problem with celiac testing is many people will probably come back and it's negative, which could be true, but it may not, because with the standard testing that's done, they're only looking at a very small percentage or a very small handful of gluten proteins and peptides. And there are many, I believe it's 64 gluten peptides and proteins out there. And if your doctor's only checking for 4 and you're negative, what if you're positive to one of the other 60 proteins or peptides out there? So it's a very, very common thing. One of the mentors that I've trained with, Dr. Tom O'Brien, he's an expert on gluten sensitivity. I know he did a podcast with Sarah and he talks a lot about this, but there are some studies that may show that no human can really digest gluten correctly. There's always going to be some sort of impairment to digesting gluten in wheat. Some people, it will attack their digestion for an hour or two and then they're better and they're fine. For other people, a tiny crumb of gluten can set them off for 2 or 3 months. So this is something where just because I eat wheat, I feel fine, I had a celiac test, I came back negative, it's fine. Not necessarily. I really challenge people to remove it from their diet for at least a month, 30 days, and then try it again. And you will discover symptoms that you weren't aware of when you bring it back into your diet. And I would trust your body's signals than a test that may or may not be 100% accurate.
That's right. And especially if you have unexplained infertility, unexplained miscarriage, thyroid disease, antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, anyone in your family has a history of celiac, and if you have autoimmunity, to really dig into taking gluten out. We have access to testing from Vibrant Wellness, and there's a Zoomer panel. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, so one of the tests that we do, we do have access to and we can look at is, it's called the Wheat Zoomer. So it dives into several of the markers of wheat, including looking at some markers to leaky gut or intestinal permeability, which could give us some clues that you perhaps are not absorbing all of your nutrients, which is a problem. The important thing that also to mention is going gluten-free. While it seems easy in theory, there's a lot of places that gluten and wheat can hide that you might not think of. So, if you think that gluten is a problem, you definitely want to reach out or work with somebody. I know there's a lot of resources on the internet that are helpful, but really make sure that you are truly going gluten-free. There is wheat byproducts that can be in personal care products. They use it as thickeners in shampoos and conditioners. There are wheat byproducts that are in some foods that you wouldn't even think. One new one that I became aware of from one of my mentors, it's meat glue, which sounds really disgusting, but there's some meat plants that when they're taking just pieces of meat and kind of sticking them back together to like present that nice juicy steak to you in the, the grocery store. And there's some wheat in that substance that's putting those pieces of meat together. Honestly, I think if you were celiac, that would be probably an issue for you more so than maybe somebody with gluten sensitivity, but there's just a lot of different places that it can hide. And so avoiding bread and crackers and pasta and thinking you're good, you really need to make sure you're reading your labels. You might want to try making your entire house gluten-free. And then if you still aren't feeling better and you're having issues, it might be worth thinking about gluten cross-reactors, which is another rabbit hole that I don't want to overwhelm people, but there are some other foods that when you eat them, your body sees them as wheat. So dairy is a very common one. And that's why very often you'll hear people say, avoid dairy and wheat, because they cross-react with each other. Oats are a very big one. Coffee is a big cross-reactor. Chocolate is a big cross-reactor. Corn can be a cross-reactor as well. So, if you've tried just taking wheat out and you're not feeling 100%, that's when maybe you might think about doing a food sensitivity test or a Zoomer test to maybe look at some of those cross-reactors and see if maybe that is causing some havoc for you. And it does take time and patience, but you will notice a difference when you start to take those foods out, and it will actually help and allow your gut to do what it likes to, which is to renew and heal itself. And that in turn will allow you to absorb all those amazing nutrients from the foods you're eating.
Yeah, if you've been gluten or dairy free for 60 to 90 days and you're not pregnant yet, it's really time to dig into testing. So that's where we would go next. But definitely check out the episode with Tom O'Brien. So is gluten causing infertility? It's just an awesome episode. And the next one we talk about in the book, It Starts with the Egg, is periodontal disease. The findings in there saying it's taking 2 months longer to conceive for people that have gum disease. Any take on that one, Brandy?
Yeah, and that's not surprising. Again, it's a whole body approach. If you have periodontal disease, which is basically infections in the mouth, it's very likely that you have infections in other places in the body. And it's a sign that your body is not in a state of optimal health. So there's very clearly some connections between periodontal disease and heart disease. I think there are some connections between long-term periodontal disease and cancers because it's an infection. So, if you've got this infection and you've got poor oral health, it's going to impact the health of the rest of your body. So it's definitely something that you want to get addressed. Ideally, you want to be working with a biological dentist who is very holistically minded and does things gently, especially if you have something like amalgams in your mouth or metal fillings. They know how to remove those safely so they're not exposing you to any of the off-gassing of the metals when they're being removed. So, if you have issues with your mouth, now's a good time to go get it looked at and checked before you get pregnant, because while you're pregnant and afterwards, your nutrients are so depleted, the health of your mouth can actually become worse. So I would definitely address it beforehand.
Yeah, and definitely check out the episode I did with Dr. Berhanna. We talked about sleep and sleep apnea, but we also talk about the microbiome, your oral microbiome. So definitely check out that episode with him. He is a biological dentist and super, super smart. The next one we have is environmental toxins. We've talked a lot about this on the podcast. And in the book, It Starts with the Egg, she talks about BPA, phthalates, plastics being linked to infertility, miscarriage, lower sperm counts. So definitely check out how to reduce toxins that impact fertility. An episode on the podcast, Are Your Personal Care Products Impacting Fertility? And I just did one recently, How to Protect Your Fertility from EMF Exposure. So those environmental toxins are those stressors we talked about at the beginning. So the food sensitivities, the gut infections, environmental toxins, mental emotional stress, the structural stress, and blood sugar and the like. So anything you wanted to say about environmental toxins?
Yeah, so it's important to know, not only do they burden your liver, which, your liver is a very important organ in the body, which helps detoxify any toxins. We are inundated with so many toxins in our world that a lot of times our livers are struggling. But some of these environmental toxins that you mentioned, like the plastics and the BPA and the phthalates and all of those, they're endocrine disruptors. So when they're in the body, they disrupt the communication between the endocrine glands, which is what we talked about before with, the hypothalamus and the thyroid and the adrenal glands and the ovaries or the testes. So anything that comes into the body that can disrupt that communication can then cause mixed messages between all of those glands. And that's why it's important to really look at personal care products and cleaning products and the like.
Absolutely. So the next one we have is carbohydrates and fertility. So we talk a lot about with our clients to help them balance blood sugar levels and insulin levels. Definitely check out the episode, Why Balancing Blood Sugar Matters for Fertility, because having high blood sugar can compromise fertility. And this was a nurses' health study. So it's an 8-year study, a Harvard study, studying over 18,000 nurses, and talk about complex carbs versus simple carbs. So the complex being those multi-grain, simple being those cakes and cookies and sort of those white flour. So it can reduce ovulatory infertility and also insulin resistance. It significantly increases the risk of miscarriage, plus it decreases IVF success rates. So getting the blood sugar imbalance is something we work on a lot. Anything you wanted to say there, Brandy?
So blood sugar imbalance actually can increase cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which then sends the signals to the body that you're under attack and it needs to be protective. And we don't need to be producing hormones and reproduce if we're under a large amount of stress or we're under attack. And so that's why it's really important to really look at blood sugar balance and take it really seriously. High and low blood sugar or, excessive amounts of sugar and carbohydrates can also lower your immune system, which is definitely going to impact your fertility. The best thing you can do if you're eating a standard American diet and eating a lot of packaged foods, switch to whole foods, try to get foods in their natural form, stick to the outside perimeter of the grocery store. Movement is important. It's just overall important, not only for yourself, but for your partners as well.
Absolutely. The next one we have is sugar. I think we all know how sugar is inflammatory to the body, and it also leads to fewer eggs retrieved and fewer good quality embryos. So we are looking at doing no processed sugar. Conventional sugar can come from sugared beets, which are highly genetically modified. If you don't have a blood sugar issue, you can look at cane sugar, not a lot, but sometimes, and they have sucanut sugar and palm sugar and all of those, but really looking at sugar alternatives such as honey or maple syrup, unless there's a blood sugar issue. And then you can look at stevia and some other sugar sweetener alternatives. You wanted to say anything there about sugar?
One of the misconceptions that's out there is, let's switch to the alternatives like agave or coconut sugar or even honey. And a lot of those are really high in fructose. And so fructose doesn't necessarily have a big impact on your blood sugar, so you think it's okay, but it does have an impact on the liver because it's processed by the liver, and excessive amounts of those sugars can lead to things like fatty liver disease. And so it's really important to be aware of excess amounts of fructose. Even if it's not affecting your blood sugar levels per se, it's definitely having an impact. I would definitely stick with things like stevia. My favorite brand is the Now brand stevia glycerite. So it's not an alcohol, it's in a glycerin. It doesn't have a bad aftertaste. You can get it anywhere. I would be careful with some of the other alternatives out there like erythritol or monk fruit, like Swerve, Lakanto. I'm not saying anything negative against those companies, but some people tend to have issues with those sweeteners. If they have them in excessive amounts, it can cause a lot of gas and bloating and gut discomfort. Every once in a while, that's fine in small amounts, but I wouldn't be replacing all of your regular sugar-laden things with treats made with a bunch of erythritol or monk fruit or xylitol. It's just going to cause havoc on your gut.
Now, the next one we have, so we were talking about celiac, now we're digging into gluten and so on. In the book, It Starts with the Egg. She's recommending those with endometriosis, a history of recurrent miscarriage, or pre-existing autoimmune disease, eliminate gluten. Our take is to take that a little bit further, is we have both our partners start the elimination diet, and that's taking out the top allergens. Definitely check out how and why to do an elimination diet, take you through the exact steps. As we were saying, a high percentage of people have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So it's not just, and if you have a sensitivity to gluten, there's the cross reactors like dairy and corn, and the ones that Brendan was talking about. So we see this very regularly. You've got to be 100%, and you can do anything for 10 days because the elimination diet is 10 days and then systematically reintroducing it over the course of 30 days. So it's not about saying you're gluten-free and then cheating, because if you are intolerant to it, even a crumb will then cause inflammation in your body for a week to months later. So it is about being diligent with this to see how your body reacts to it.
I mean, the best example that I can give of this is two of my children. Two of my children are gluten sensitive, and they have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. If they have a little bit, and this is even a gluten cross reactor, not necessarily gluten because we are strictly gluten-free, they will get eczema on their skin that will take months to heal from one exposure. This is why it's really important to be diligent about it. If you know that you're sensitive to gluten, make your entire house gluten-free. If you have a spouse that's wanting to eat it in the house, it's time to have that tough conversation, because you can easily get cross-contaminated by sharing utensils, pots and pans, toasters, oven. There are so many things that, it's so easily to get cross-contaminated. And I mean, it's not that we don't want you enjoying life, but even thinking about when you're eating out at restaurants, it's very easy to become cross-contaminated there. I mean, I have celiac and two of my kids have gluten sensitivity. We just don't eat out. I know it sucks, but we bake our food at home and we know we're going to be okay. It's just not worth the skin rash or the headache or the bloating or whatever it is that you get. The nice thing is that there are more and more places out there. It's getting easier to find restaurants or bakeries or things like that that are dedicated gluten-free, where you can go out and enjoy yourselves. And I would definitely choose those options to minimize your exposure.
Absolutely. We're all non-celiac gluten sensitivity, the four of us in the household as well. And I'm excited because my bakery is doing a curbside pickup, and I've got a large order that I'm picking up on Saturday. I can't wait. My gluten-free vegan bakery is ready for business. And the next one we have is dairy. So there are studies that saying those with a higher intake of dairy had a higher chance of live birth. We are seeing people, again, with a high sensitivity to dairy as well when we're doing testing, and also people remarking on symptoms when they're doing the elimination diet. So it starts with the egg, does talk about taking a no stone unturned approach and eliminating both dairy and gluten. We are saying to go deeper with the elimination diet, which is dairy, gluten, soy, corn, peanuts, eggs, processed sugar for 10 days, and then systematically reintroduce. So as we see a lot of people that are off the chart with dairy.
Yeah. And I mean, dairy in its whole form. So I'm not a fan of like skim milk or 1% or anything like that, but whole full fat dairy can be very good for some people. It can be very nutrient dense. It has a lot of really great, like grass-fed butter has vitamin A and vitamin K2 and vitamin D. Like it's very nutrient dense if it works for you. But unfortunately for a lot of people, they're just very sensitive, and dairy has different components. So some people are lactose intolerant, which is the milk sugar. Some people are intolerant to the casein, which is the protein. So you really do have to judge whether or not it works for you. You might follow something like the Weston A. Price Foundation. They're very big on preparing your body for at least 1 to 2 years before getting pregnant, and they include dairy as part of that. If it works for you, go for it. But if it doesn't, just be honest with yourself and avoid it. And some of the most common symptoms with dairy is issues with your sinuses, postnasal drip, phlegminess, skin rash, brain fog, gas and bloating. Those are some pretty big common symptoms of dairy intolerance.
In there. Yeah. Not fun, but once you, again, if you identify these issues for yourself, so if there is an issue for you, then you can do something about it. So it's empowering. Vitamin D is a well-studied nutrient and actually functions more like a hormone in the body. More recent research highlights the intricate relationship between vitamin D status and fertility, and you've likely gone to your doctor, been told everything is fine and within the lab reference range. But the truth is, conventional lab ranges aren't going to cut it. We want to make sure that your vitamin D level is in the optimal range, especially if you have an autoimmune condition or are struggling to conceive. And studies have shown that inadequate levels of vitamin D can be linked to decreased ovarian reserve, as indicated by higher serum FSH, low AMH, and antral follicle count. So it's truly the multitasker playing a role in egg quality, production of hormones, and immune function. But first of all, the form is very important, with D3 being the MVP here. You also want to make sure you select a supplement that contains a combination of D3 and K2, like our Fab vitamin D supplement, Fab D3 K2, to ensure maximum benefit and also assist in keeping your bones strong and healthy and calcium levels in check. So definitely check out our Fab vitamin D3 K2 supplement. All you need to do is go to fflnaturals.com. Use the code GPN15 at checkout to receive 15% discount. That's fflnaturals.com. Use the code GPN15 to receive a 15% discount. One of my favorite ways to figure out exactly how food impacts your body is by starting an elimination diet. Basically, you're taking out the top allergens for 10 days. And those allergens include gluten, dairy, corn, soy, eggs, peanuts, processed sugars, and alcohol. And then you systematically reintroduce the foods over the course of 30 days. And then you'll know how those foods impact your body and ultimately your fertility. We've had so many people that are intolerant to foods they eat on a regular basis. Maybe you're intolerant to lettuce, or maybe you're intolerant to avocados or nuts or chicken, something that you may be eating on a regular basis. If you have leaky gut or intestinal permeability, this can be causing inflammation or reaction in your body. So it's not that you're taking these foods out forever. It's for a short period of time to allow the body to heal. So it's a customized approach, and you'll know for sure how food impacts the body. There's never a great time to start this, so you don't want to pick vacation or a birthday. However, you need to rip off the Band-Aid and start, and do this with your partner. So I'm excited that we have developed a free fertility recipe guide for you, all filled with spring recipes. There's a 5-day meal plan, grocery shopping list, all free from the top allergens. This is dipping your toe into the elimination diet. So all you need to do is go to fertilitydietfreebie.com. That's fertilitydieFreebie.com, fertilitydietfreebie.com, and get your free fertility recipe guide, all filled with spring recipes. So in the book, she's also talking about the Mediterranean diet. So 2018 studies talking about inflammation due to infertility or miscarriage. Doing the Mediterranean diet can boost IVF rates. our thinking here is we're talking about, is that diet right for you? So there's great parts of the Mediterranean diet, but is that diet right for you? So really tweaking this with the elimination diet, going deeper into food sensitivity testing, and doing a diet that's right for you.
Yeah, so the Mediterranean diet is really, it's very anti-inflammatory and has some really amazing foods. And for a lot of people, it really works. But like you said, if you have a histamine problem, you may not be able to handle avocados, which are amazing. So it's really not taking everything by a blanket recommendation, but personalizing it for your situation.
Absolutely. And then as part of the Mediterranean diet, the fats and oils, fats are building blocks for your hormones. And really, with the Mediterranean diet, looking at fish, nuts, and olive oils, it leads to a higher quality of embryos, wild caught fish, of course. Anything you wanted to say there about fats and oils? I think there's been years of us being, I did that whole low fat craze, years of us being afraid of fat. I think it's coming back into now that, we know that it can be healthy, but we still are seeing when we're doing food diaries, because when we start the program, we have both our couples do a food diary, and we can regularly see that they may not getting enough fat.
Yeah, and fats are important as long as you're getting the right kind of fat. So, you definitely want to be avoiding the highly processed manufactured vegetable oils like corn, canola, soy, cottonseed, safflower, sunflower, and opt for other oils like olive oil, avocado oil. Olive oil I would use cold, so I wouldn't use it for cooking. Mm-hmm. Avocado oil has a really good smoke point, so you can definitely use that for cooking. Things like coconut oil, animal fats are really stable at room temperature. I know a lot of people are scared of them, but it used to be that French fries at McDonald's were fried in tallow before switching to a vegetable oil. So those are really stable and can be nourishing, but just really focusing on high quality oils. One thing I will say about nuts can be really good, but they can also be high in omega-6s, which can be inflammatory. And if you eat too many nuts, it could affect your gut. So if your gut's already sensitive and inflamed from other food sensitivities or maybe some pathogens, nuts may make that worse. So something to keep in mind.
Now, the next one we have is AIP diet. So we've talked a lot about it on the podcast about the efficacy of the AIP diet. It's for Hashimoto's, irritable bowel disease, so Crohn's and colitis. There's some studies that were published back in 2019. So definitely check out the AIP diet and infertility on the podcast. So if there's a history of autoimmunity, endometriosis, miscarriage, we've seen success for POI and low AMH doing an AIP diet. So anything you wanted to say there, Brandy?
Yeah, so the philosophy with the autoimmune protocol is removing as many inflammatory foods as you can and really kind of giving your body a break and allowing it to calm down the inflammation, calm down the immune system, and allow the body to do what it needs to do and knows what it knows to do because it innately wants to be in balance and it innately wants to be healing. It is a pretty restrictive diet, so I generally don't recommend an autoimmune diet long term because it can be really restrictive. But for about 3 months, when you allow the immune system to calm down, if you want to start introduce things slowly, you can definitely do that, but it can be very effective for some people.
In the book, there's a section on male factor infertility and sperm health. So making sure taking a multivitamin, we're going to talk about supplements in a minute, but CoQ10 and omega, dealing with those environmental toxins. These are linked to low sperm count. So your BPAs, your phthalates, your EMF, looking at diet. So when we do this, it's both partners doing the elimination diet. It's not just the female making all these changes. The partner is doing that because 50% of this is male factor infertility, even though it starts the egg is focusing on the egg. It takes 2 to have a baby. Also with sperm count, so pesticides, there was studies talking about if you didn't have produce that had pesticides, there was 169% higher sperm count and 173% higher sperm concentration. Switching to an organic diet is definitely key for both partners. Alcohol, I see this a lot with, the female partner's done all these changes and he's still, again, this is generalizing, this is not your case, but he's still drinking alcohol. So there is reduced IVF success rate and increased miscarriage when the male partner is continuing to consume alcohol. And then looking at filtering your water, and also your lubricant can have a negative impact on sperm. So in the book, she's talking about pre-seed has the least negative impact on sperm. Anything like this is a whole other podcast on for men. I have done other episodes on the podcast talking about male fertility, but anything you wanted to say there? Maybe about the multi for men.
I definitely have a lot of experience with this. So one of the things that my husband and I did before we had our twins, which was our first, is both of us actually embarked on organic, dairy clean, nutrient dense foods. He was taking a multivitamin. We were adding in things that we knew helped boost fertility. So we were both on the same page, cleaning up the personal care products, all of those things. And it definitely have an impact. We didn't go through IVF, but we became pregnant with twins. And we really do feel like it was all of that prep work that we did for 6 months before we started trying that really had an impact for both of us. So it wasn't just me, it was both of us doing it. So I think it's important that both partners are on board.
Absolutely. Anything you wanted to say about the multi for men?
So I think it's important for men to get a multivitamin just because it's hard to get nutrients solely in the diet. And the ones for men are going to have important nutrients for them, specifically things like zinc for the health of the sperm, less iron because men tend to not need iron. They hold iron better than women. So, you definitely want to pick a good quality multivitamin. And I think it can be helpful, like I said, because it's hard to get all the nutrients that you need from food.
And so it starts with the egg. The book, as well as the website, has a list of supplements. So I'm just going to go through some of these supplements here. And again, when we develop a protocol, it's based on functional testing, and then we develop a targeted protocol for a period of time. There are some basic supplements that we would recommend long term, but that's only a handful. Most of the ones that we're recommending, it's based on testing. It's for a short period of time. One of the basic supplements we're going to recommend is prenatal. I think a lot of people are knowing now that it's no longer folic acid, that you need to have methylated folate. Most people I speak with have made this change. And in the book, It Starts with the Egg, she is talking about that because with the MTHFR gene variant, which is your reduced ability to convert folate to the active methylfolate, you want to make sure that you have a methylated folate prenatal, and also having sure that the male partner is taking a methylfolate.
Quality does matter. You're not going to want to go to Walmart or Costco or CVS and just get whatever's on the shelf there. I mean, quality does matter when it comes to a prenatal, so it is worth paying a little bit more for high quality.
And so B12, there's a study found that high B12 has better embryo quality. B12 decreases homocysteine levels, and also B6 increases the likelihood of pregnancy. So low levels, there's a high incidence of miscarriage. Can you just talk about what we're seeing with B12 levels, Brandy?
B12, again, can be a rabbit hole, complicated conversation, but many times we actually see many women low in B12. And a lot of times that has to do with low stomach acid and poor digestion. It's really hard to get good quality amounts of B12 from non-animal sources. The same is true with iron. I know we're not talking about iron, but you do need to have good quality stomach acid and good quality digestion to absorb B12. I have seen some instances where women are supplementing with B12. This is definitely my instance. If I supplement with B12, it goes really high in the blood. And that doesn't mean that my levels are good. It's just that my cells aren't able to use it because I do have MTHFR. I'm homozygous, so both copies basically. It's best for me to get it from food. And to do that, I need to work on my digestion and my stomach acid. And I tend to not take high levels of B12. I rely what's in a multi and really add in foods that are high in B12.
The next one we have is CoQ10. And I'd say the majority of people that come to us are taking CoQ10. This has kind of been quite popularized, that it's helpful for egg health and a whole host of other things with the body. But basically, with poor mitochondria function, so someone that may have POF or POI and poor responders to IVF. So high performing mitochondria is the hallmark of egg quality. So it will increase the energy supply to fuel the egg development. And a study of CoQ10 1 to 2 months prior to IVF increases egg quality, and recommending ubiquinol. And those with infertility may have low blood pressure, so adrenal dysfunction, so it may be good for blood sugar control. Anything you want to say there about CoQ10?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on CoQ10, but I do know it's really important for mitochondrial health, which is the energy production of the cell. One question that you would want to ask yourself is that if you do have poor mitochondrial health, why? Yeah. So, I mean, CoQ10 is helpful. You see a lot of people as we age, we make less CoQ10. So supplementation is not harmful. We don't tend to have it as like a top recommendation because most people are already taking it and we don't want to have like bags full of supplements. But it can be helpful, and you do kind of want to ask yourself, why do I have poor mitochondrial health? What else is going on that I can work on to improve the mitochondria?
Absolutely. Definitely check out why mitochondria health is so important for fertility on the episode and the podcast. So you can search that. The next thing we have is oxidative stress. So basically, higher oxidative stress is a lower chance of egg making it to blastocyst. The oxidative stress is higher with people with PCOS, so insulin resistant and higher blood sugar. Some of the things to improve oxidative stress, we're going to talk about those now. First one is melatonin. So the book does say it can help with IVF. It has an important role in ovulation, and higher melatonin levels can lead to a higher AMH and a higher follicle count. But before supplementing, it will impact the body's ability to produce melatonin. This is not the case if you're going through IVF because large doses of hormones are given artificially to regulate the cycle. So let's talk about melatonin and what we regularly see.
Melatonin is a powerful antioxidant. We make it while we're sleeping. So if you have high levels or good levels of melatonin, your body is detoxifying as you sleep. If you don't have good melatonin levels, then your body's not able to get into that deep restorative detoxing sleep. It's always best for you to get it naturally. And so there's a lot of things that can affect your melatonin production. Cortisol, so high cortisol, high stress. Cortisol blocks melatonin production. Lots of blue light or too much light exposure at the end of the day can block melatonin production. If you have any blood sugar imbalances while you're sleeping, the cortisol is going to go up and that's going to shut down melatonin production. Gut pathogens are actually more active at night and around the full moon. And so you may find that you don't sleep well at night or you fall asleep easily and wake up in the middle of the night. And that could be, again, a stressor, which then is blocking melatonin production. So there are some instances where supplementing with melatonin can be beneficial, although I personally am not a fan of supplementing long-term because it might send the signal to your body not to produce its own. We spend a lot of time working on sleep hygiene and sleep routines so that you can naturally boost your body's own production of melatonin and you're getting that good quality sleep so that your body's able to detoxify while you're sleeping.
And we run the Dutch test. And so this will give us this is looking at your hormones using urine, and it'll look at your melatonin. And we regularly see people that are supplementing and it's off the chart, which is not a good thing either. And the question we had on this, actually, the difference between melatonin and 5-HTP, and should you take either of them?
Yeah, so 5-HTP is a precursor for serotonin. And so 5-HTP can actually produce serotonin, which then has that downstream effect that it can help to produce melatonin and help with sleep. So serotonin helps calm the body down. So 5-HTP can be used, but again, it's something where I wouldn't use 5-HTP as a crutch long term. You definitely want to be testing. And the thing with 5-HTP is that if you're taking it and you feel good for a while and then all of a sudden you stop feeling good, that's a sign that your body has had enough and you might be taking too much. So it's definitely different. It's not the same thing.
So vitamin E, which is the studies in the book talking about helping with uterine lining. This can be in a prenatal. Anything you wanted to say about vitamin E?
Just kind of talk about oxidative stress really quickly, because I think that will lead into some of the antioxidants that we're going to talk about. So the best example I can give for oxidative stress is you cut an apple and then it turns brown. It's because the apple was exposed to the air and it was oxidized. And so that can happen in the body if we're not getting enough antioxidants, which help keep the body healthy. And too much oxidation damages your cells and can damage DNA. So that's why it's important to get antioxidants. Now, we can get plenty of antioxidants by having a wide variety of fresh fruits and vegetables and foods. But some of the most common supplemental antioxidants are going to be things like vitamin E, like you're talking about, alpha lipoic acid. Those are some really common antioxidants. Vitamin C is an antioxidant. So that's likely why a lot of those are being recommended for fertility if oxidation is a problem. And like you said, we do use the Dutch test with our clients, and there is a marker of oxidative stress on there. So if we see that high, then we will work with people to either add in antioxidants or add more antioxidant-rich foods into their diet. Chemical exposure, secondhand smoke, Those types of things are some of the more common reasons, but a poor diet can also lead to oxidative stress.
Right. And so, and vitamin C, so shorter time for pregnancy for women over the healthy weight and under 35, people taking vitamin C. Again, I think like some of these, if you're taking each supplement, can be like a reductionist view of the whole body. We're looking at the whole body using testing to dig into it. Obviously, vitamin C can be helpful. Anything you wanted to say there on vitamin C?
Yeah, so vitamin C is it's good for the immune system. It's very supportive to the adrenal glands, which helps with the stress response. So it is a good all-around nutrient. You just want to make sure you're getting a good quality vitamin C from fruits and vegetables. You can get vitamin C in high amounts from there. I don't think it's negative for anybody. I think everybody would benefit from vitamin C.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we're looking at the testing, we're then recommending dietary changes too, simple things you can just add into your diet, not necessarily always taking the supplement approach. Alpha lipoic acid, so it helps with hormonal irregularities such as PCOS, reduces inflammation, benefits with miscarriage, endometriosis. Anything you wanted to say there?
Alpha lipoic acid is an antioxidant, like I mentioned, so it can be helpful to combat oxidative stress, and it's just like that extra level of detoxification in antioxidant. It helps the antioxidant status.
The next one is I'm not going to be able to pronounce this one, N-acetylcysteine.
N-acetylcysteine, yep. So N-acetylcysteine is a precursor for glutathione. Glutathione is a master antioxidant made in the liver. And so N-acetylcysteine can be helpful if you're not producing enough glutathione, which is an indication that there's some liver burden, which we've talked about all along with environmental stressors and too much sugar, too much fructose, and all of those things. And again, when we look at the Dutch test, there is a marker for glutathione on there. So we can see how your glutathione is doing. And a lot of times whenever we work with somebody, we will recommend a liver support supplement, and N-acetylcysteine is usually something that's included in that supplement.
And that just decreases miscarriage in women with PCOS by 60% and reduces pain and cysts associated with endo. And the next one we have, myo-inositol, which helps with PCOS, restores ovulation, improves egg quality, prevents gestational diabetes. Anything you wanted to say with that?
Yeah, so myo-inositol is a B vitamin, and it is really helpful for insulin sensitivity. So we do see this a lot with people with PCOS. They have insulin issues or blood sugar issues. So myo-inositol can be really helpful to improve insulin sensitivity, which also has a really big impact on fertility.
We've got a question here. Will it help with repeat pregnancy loss or diminished ovarian reserve?
Myo-inositol itself, I don't think it would. That's something where you definitely want to dig deeper into what else is going on. I would say in situations like that, there's no one supplement that's going to fix that.
Digging deeper. DHEA, we regularly see that people are supplementing with DHEA if they have diminished ovarian reserve. It's recommended for those that are preparing for IVF, and it may decrease miscarriage by increasing the number of chromosomally normal eggs. And also DOR also overlaps with poor responders, so a lower success rate with IVF. So they're typically doing DHEA potentially with Clomid. This is something that we see a lot. So can you talk about why a blood test for DHEA-S and testosterone is not enough?
So DHEA is the precursor hormone. So you can take DHEA and make estrogen or testosterone or progesterone. And so that's why it's often used, because it's a precursor rather than using testosterone or estrogen or estradiol or progesterone itself. What happens is somebody will give a client DHEA and hope that it balances the other hormones. If you are supplementing with DHEA, you want to make sure that you are checking your hormones on a regular basis. Now, with blood testing, there are some good reasons to use blood testing at certain times of the cycle, but it is only telling you what's available in your blood at that moment in time. So it doesn't always tell you everything that's going on. And I have actually seen a lot of people who have side effects from DHEA, like headaches, and they just don't feel well. So if you are taking DHEA, you want to make sure you know why, and you're having follow-up testing on a regular basis to see what's happening with your hormones. Are you taking that DHEA and converting it to a bunch of testosterone, and that's not what you want? So it's important to see how your body's utilizing the DHEA.
Yeah, because the side effects can be oily skin, oily hair, hair loss, acne. And the last one is L-carnitine. So in the book, it talks about using this for sperm health. It also can be used for PCOS. Studies indicates it improves ovulation, insulin sensitivities, and regular ovulation, and improves sperm motility by 8% and morphology by 5%. This is not something that we typically recommend. Anything you wanted to say there?
Yeah, so acetyl L-carnitine can be something that's recommended to help with lipid absorption and utilization. So if you're not utilizing fats correctly, acetyl L-carnitine can really help with that. And as we already talked about, fats are really important for hormone production. It's also an important component for producing sperm. So if you're not utilizing fats well, then acetyl L-carnitine can be helpful.
So obviously there's a lot of good research in the book. It starts with the egg, but remember, these are generalized guidelines. And so as I was talking about it can take a reductionist viewpoint of fertility, and we're looking at the whole body, not focusing on the symptoms. So just want to talk a little bit about the Fab Fertile method. So as we're talking about, we're doing functional testing, food sensitivity testing, hormone testing using urine, stool testing, looking at the DNA of your stool, looking for gut infections, hair tissue, mineral analysis testing. We were talking about you can eat that really beautiful, nutrient-dense, healthy diet, but maybe your body's not absorbing these foods. We regularly see this. If you've been on hormonal long-term birth control, we see for the hair tissue mineral analysis testing, we see people that are eating this beautiful, healthy diet, but they're not absorbing the minerals in the foods. That can regularly be the case for people that were on hormonal birth control. And so that predisposes you to gut infections, food sensitivities, and not being able to absorb the nutrients. So those are the 4 tests we're doing: food sensitivity testing, stool testing, hormone testing, hair testing. We're also doing a blood chemistry review. And it's not to diagnose, it's to educate, to really figure out, well, what's been missed here when you've been told that your blood chemistry is normal, or maybe you've been told there's some areas for improvement, but you're not sure what to do next. So that's the functional testing we're doing. And then we're really looking at the foundations of the basics on this. And sometimes we get focused on doing supplements and other things and forgetting the basics. So the basics are looking at the diet. And in this case, the diet that's right for you. If you have a high sensitivity to gluten and it's coming in every day, that's causing inflammation in your body, and that can impact your fertility. Looking at sleep, we talked about with melatonin. Sleep hygiene is key. We work on it for months. Movement, so the right movement for you. Stress, looking at mental emotional stress, and also the stress from a gut infection and food sensitivity. But first of all, getting honest about your stressors, busy job, toxic relationships, trauma associated with infertility, or trauma in your childhood that's unresolved. So being able to address those is key. So you really can't out supplement these basics. And although a lot of people come to us and it's like, what's the supplements? Let's do the testing, and there is a supplement protocol. The basics are key. And as we say, the stressors, it's the diet that's right for you. It's addressing those gut infections. We regularly see people with unexplained infertility, low AMH, POI, POF, and repeat miscarriage, whatever diagnosis it may be, with gut infections, be it parasites, fungal infections, worms, bacterial infections, the environmental toxins that we talked about. So those personal care, your cleaning products, being able to minimize your exposure to these. And the stressors we just talked about, the mental emotional stress and the structural stress. If you were in a car accident, or if you have a pinched nerve or something's out of alignment, that's causing stress on your body. So being able to look at the testing, work on those fundamental things such as diet, sleep, movement, and stress, digging more into the stressors. And the key to all of this is really including your partner. It's 50-50 for female and male infertility. It is not just you making all these changes. Your partner needs to be in this with you. And if he's not ready, you can start by leading by example. And you can never drag someone over to the finish line, but you lead by example. And when he sees you starting to make these changes, typically he will come over. But it takes 2 to prepare your body for a baby. And it also helping to have both of you on the same page. So it's really from a physical, like both of you guys eating together, doing the elimination diet together. You're both cooking together. Both of you, you may have put joy on hold, as you prepare your body for a baby. It could be just the singular focus of your relationship and all the things, the intimacy, all the things you guys love to do together. You may have stopped doing that. I did a episode on how to optimize your fertility by including your partner. I really highly recommend to listen to that, but including the partner is key to the success of the program. I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. This call is for you if you meet at least one of the following criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This call is for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering work with us, go to fabfertile.com. That's fabfertile.com and click on Apply Here. That's Fab Fertile, fabfertile.com, and click on Apply Here. Then you'll be booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.